Place that I will show you to a place you do not know where you belong. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Rav Shmuel, Rashbi, Rav Shmuel ben Yehoshua, Rabbi Stephen with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. Guess which parsha it is? That's right, Lech Lecha. Very interesting parsha, very interesting portion, because in my mind, and maybe you'll agree with me, this is the beginning of Judaism. So before we get to that, hope your 5785 is going well. Hope we're all getting over the high holidays. It's the high holidays are very interesting because, while I personally love them, I do. I love the holidays. I love doing the services. It's a lot. It's very exhausting. And I want to thank everybody that helped and participated. We had a turnout here. People participated. And if you're not with Temple Shalom of Ontario and you're watching this, then I hope wherever you were too, same thing. So Lech Lecha. So it's the third portion of Torah, third portion of Genesis, and we've rolled back to the beginning. And here we have God approaching Avram, whom we got introduced to at the end of the last portion, Noah. And he's telling Noah at the ripe old age of 75 to pick up and leave. So back then, society wasn't very, very mobile. You were pretty much living with your family or with your clan. You were involved in whatever pursuit you were, farming, herding cattle, whatever. And so to pick up, especially after a lifetime of developing a family and of being used to something and go somewhere else, who knows where, because God's telling Abraham, just go and I'll tell you where you're going to go as you get there, et cetera, et cetera. That was pretty much a big act of faith. And God chose Abraham, or Avram as he's being known right now, to do this because God knew that Avram would go ahead and do it. So we have in our triennial portion, we're reading, as you all may know by now, we're reading the last part, the last third of the parshas. Now, this is a rule of thumb. It's most of the parshas. There will be a few where we don't, or we read half of it because it may contain something like the Ten Commandments, and we want to put that into our portion, the Shema, things like that. And some of the parshas may be a little bit expanded. Also, remember, this year is not a leap year. 5785 is a regular year. So we're going to be doubling up on portions. And our triennial will be a little bit bigger, larger. So what have we got going? All right, so what's going on here is that, again, Avram is being told by God to just up and leave. Where he's at is not conducive to this new concept of monotheism, where there's one God and there's divine justice, and God knows that Avram needs to leave. So let's talk about his name for a minute. Avram, Sarai. Avram, father of Haran, which is where he was from. Sarai, my princess. And by the way, people typically interpret the word Yisrael as one who struggles, which it is. But remember that in Judaism, it's a very conceptual language, and there are different meanings, different constructs of a word. So Sarai, which means my princess, is really kind of the same root as Yisrael, Sarah, Sa'el, right? And it means prince. So you have both of those meanings. And Jacob was named Yisrael in addition to his Jacob name. And he was kind of a prince of this new thing we call Judaism. So what we're going to find as we move along into into our triennial portion, into the end of the parsha, is that God contacts Avram and says, "You will no longer be known as Avram; you will now be known as Abraham." So it's both a negative commandment to not refer to him as Avram, and it's a positive commandment to refer to him as Abraham. If you look at the art scroll, Chumash, the one that I'm kind of going through this year, they, in the commentary, refer to him as Abraham anyway. They're literally following that commandment. And in the commentary, even though at the time he's still known as Avram, they refer to him as Abraham, which is father of all nations. So Sarai, my princess, is now Sarah, which is princess. So she is now the matriarch, the mother of Judaism. Within this context, Avraham also becomes circumcised. And here we have the beginning of our tradition of naming a baby during after the 8 days of circumcision. And God tells Avraham that this is going to be the case. On the 8th day of life, the baby will be circumcised. And consider back then, it was pretty brutal. You know, they'd pick up a very sharp rock or they'd sharpen it and cut off that part of the male gender, the penis, and expose it. And why do we do this? Well, it is a covenant, but it's been conjectured, and a lot of times, you know, a lot of things are decrees, like eating kosher. You know, why circumcise? Why take that extra skin off a male's penis, right? A man's penis. Not that women have penises, but you know what I'm saying, right? Okay. Because some people say that one of the important things that we do as Jews, and here's the commandment, be fruitful and multiply. So in order to remember that covenant and to establish and continue that covenant, there needs to be no barrier, no physical barrier between a man and a woman when they're creating life in God's name. And we see that word mul, we saw it during Yom Kippur, during the high holidays, as, you know, excise your heart, take that barrier off of your heart and open it up to Hashem. So this is kind of a physical way in which we're having that covenant. And the interesting thing about the commandment to perform that brit milah, mul, milah, right? The covenant is that it's done on the 8th day of life, even if that day is Shabbat. And this is one of the few things that overrules some of the Shabbat mandates. What's another one? Fasting, right? If Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat, you fast. Now, usually you don't fast during Shabbat. It's a day of joy. You don't want to fast, right? You want to enjoy. In fact, you're supposed to eat 3 meals. The Hebrew diet, as I understand it, was basically 2 meals, breakfast and dinner. And then when they were out in the fields, they'd nosh, you know, because they get hungry working, and they'd nosh a little bit on whatever they had out there. And that was it. So this is base. And by the way, Abraham circumcised his whole household. Eliezer, his chief of staff, and also Ishmael, who was his son, who was 13 years at the time. I believe that if you get the timeline right, Isaac is born later on, so 9 months later or so. So Isaac is really the first Jewish person born because he was born by a circumcised Jewish male. And Ishmael, being the father of Islam, this is when they get circumcised at 13. Okay, so that's the way they do. Now, let's talk a little bit about the metaphor here. So when Abraham, is being told by God, pick up and leave and go to a place where I will show you, there's a spiritual component to this. He's saying the paganism and the religion that you've known, I want you to leave that. And you're going to go to a new spiritual place, this thing called Judaism, this monotheism, where we believe in divine justice, when we believe that everybody, you know, is God's children. So, you know, love your neighbor as yourself. So there's a spiritual component to that because this is brand new. Now, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, they had relationships with Hashem. Noah, relationship with Hashem. Okay. And they've had kind of fleeting relationships. And now Abraham is going to establish a covenant with Hashem and create a lineage of a heritage and a culture and a belief system where we all have that one-on-one relationship with God. Yes, we have a community, but we also have that one-on-one relationship with God. So this is a spiritual journey that's starting here at the beginning of the world. It's about the world is, according to Genesis, 2,000 years old. And now, or 200 years old or so, 2000. And now we're going to start this new thing called Judaism. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. And I appreciate your attention and Shabbat Shalom to you. And see you at the next reading.